Madam Chair. Good afternoon and welcome to the February 2023 work session of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission. My name is Kiba Samuel and I have the privilege of serving as chair of the Planning Commission. Officially call this meeting to order. This meeting is being held at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Government Center, 600 East 4th Street in room 267 for viewing by the public and media. Today's meeting is being streamed live on the Planning, Design, and Development Department's YouTube page. We'll move through introductions, beginning with my commissioners from my right, please.
Vice Chair Philip Gussman.
Shauna Neely, Rebecca Weldon,
Rick Winiker.
Melissa Gaston,
Terry Lansdale.
Clayton Seeley. Will Russell.
Courtney Rhodes,
Douglas Welton.
Staff, please, from my left.
Siobhan Davis, Planning Staff,
Allison Craig, Interim Planning Director.
Candace Rory, Planning Staff.
And again, my name is Kiba Samuel, serving as chair of the Planning Commission. If everyone has had a chance to review the agenda packet, particularly the minutes and note packets, and advise of any edits or corrections needed.
Move approval. Lansdale, move approval.
Welton, second.
Motion by Lansdale to approve, second by Walton. Discussion. I think there's one note. I think the meeting minutes from the executive committee are from January. And those minutes have not been adopted by executive committee yet. So I think there is a need to temporarily strike them until they are officially adopted by the executive committee. I just think the wrong set of minutes were included. Do we need an alternative motion or an edited motion, please, Mr.?
So I'd like to edit the motion for approval, reflecting the removal of the January XCOM minutes.
I will second again.
Motion by Lansdale, seconded by Walton. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimous. Thank you. As we begin to map out the remainder of the 2023 work and agendas for the Planning Commission, we wanted to put a focus on infrastructure, kind of mirroring what council is paying attention to. Coincidentally, it wasn't on purpose, but as we are adding a little bit deeper level of focus in our decision-making, just hearing what might be coming down the pipe from our different departments in terms of capital improvements or planning projections. We wanted to get before us a number of departments so that we, again, stay aware and that we coordinate or at least keep in consideration some of the planning efforts of our different departments. In the next couple of months, we will hear from Charlotte Fire, CMS, Charlotte Water and Sewer, and a few others regarding their planning projections and projects that are underway. Today, we will hear, along that vein, we will hear about our corridors of opportunity. And we have our planning team member here with us, Monica Holmes, to kind of go through that process with us. And I'll turn it over to Allison now for some additional context.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take a couple minutes to introduce Monica. I know many of you know Monica Holmes. She has taken on a new role here. I'm managing, she's the executive manager for our corridors of opportunity work. This is a really neat effort that she'll talk to us even about how it's structured, much less the really important work that we are doing in these corridors. But we've got a team of staff and directors in all the different departments all working together in a very horizontal way. And so even on her own team, she has staff that sit in different departments. So it's a really unique way that we're really working together. And so Monica Holmes is, as I said, the executive manager for corridors, but she also still is in planning. So she manages the design and preservation division still in planning, which includes our urban design center and our historic district commission. So she's got a pretty full plate. But I think most of her work right now is centered around corridors. And so I will turn it over to Monica to give you an update on all the important stuff she's doing right now.
Make sure this goes away.
Oh,
It's not going away.
there
it goes.
There it goes.
Okay, it'll go away.
Okay.
Well, thanks. I'm very excited to be here today, and it's good to see a lot of familiar faces. Hi, everyone. It's been, I don't know, it's been a little bit of a while since I've been at Planning Commission. So excited to share this portfolio of work in the city. I think it's really exciting, and hopefully you will agree. Feel free to ask questions along the way, and I'm happy to serve any follow-up, kind of provide more information and details. This is really a broad presentation, kind of covering the breadth of the corridors of opportunity work. It can take a lot of different turns, and I am here to help with that. So here we go. Okay, so today we're going to cover just really how the Corridors of Opportunity program is set up, how we work, what our partnerships look like, what we have accomplished in 2022 and 2021 prior to me joining the team. And then what are we doing this year? How are we looking forward? What does the next year, 2 years look like? So just a reminder, the Corridors of Opportunity is a demonstration of the city's commitment to equitable investment and opportunity in 6 historically underinvested corridors within the city of Charlotte. I say that the purpose and goal of corridors is to provide lasting legacy and prosperity for our existing residents and business owners within 6 corridors. You can see those corridors listed here: Beatties Ford Road, Freedom and Wilkinson, West Boulevard, Sugar Creek and 85, Graham North Tryon, and Central and Albemarle. Each of those 6 corridors is at a different place in planning and implementation. We've been moving them in batches of 2, and you'll see that in the portfolio of work. So when the Corridors of Opportunity program was initially launched in 2020, 2021, Beatties Ford Road and West Boulevard quickly moved into implementation. Over the year following that, we did extensive engagement in Sugar Creek and Albemarle. Those are adding to the implementation list currently as we speak. Melissa's here. She can attest that we've been working hard over the fall in Graham North Tryon to get those projects identified and into implementation. And then we'll be kicking off Wilkinson and Freedom in the late spring, early summer, and that'll just again add to that list. So very quickly working to get all 6 projects and corridors off the ground. So how are we organized as a team? Allison mentioned it, and I really think that it's very important to reiterate that this is something that we as a city organization are really doing differently. So we have in corridors 9 city departments, 3 assistant city managers. We have county departments involved, all in the implementation in corridors. So we meet every 2 weeks for an hour and a half with the assistant city managers and 9 department directors to really guide the development in corridors and provide the strategic visioning. I manage those meetings, my whole staff attends those meetings, and it's really a time for us to discuss strategic priorities and how we're moving things forward. Then from that point, we have 5 staff designated to corridors. It really makes up the corridors core team, which Allison mentioned. We have people in housing and neighborhood services, economic development, the manager's office. We have an executive on loan from Bank of America, and then I sit in planning. with that core team, one of my staff in the core team also manages our implementation team. So that team is about 58, 60 members in total, and it represents 10 city departments, 3 county departments. And we spend on average, we did a little math at the end of last year, about 700 hours of staff time weekly in how we are putting projects on the ground in each of our 6 corridors. So this structure really took shape over the past spring, summer, and has been really hitting the ground running since that time. And so it's really given us the ability to pull different levels all the way from senior leadership down to boots on the ground who's doing the work to make sure that we are thinking horizontally, we're connecting all the dots, and that we're implementing the work in a way that is authentic, in a way that meets the community's needs and isn't just the way that we are structured as a government agency. So this is the team, this is the core team. So you can see from left to right, we have a community engagement manager, Aisha Sabor. Aaron Gillespie serves as our strategy and development manager. I'm the executive manager, kind of overseeing the team. We have an operations manager that really is day-to-day, making sure things are get done. Walta Blackman, she actually is a registered engineer. So she comes from that mindset, building traffic projects, getting things done. And then again, as I mentioned, our leader on loan, Robin Stewart. We're really lucky to have on loan right now also working with us, Emily Kunze, who sits in the manager's office. Oops. Did I miss one? Okay. So the framework of corridors really speaks to, I know you guys are familiar with it. I don't know if everybody in the city is as well versed as you are, but I really like to put into focus that corridors is strategic implementation of the framework that we have adopted for the city. So the way our corridors team is structured fits within Charlotte Future 2040 within that comprehensive plan framework. So 6 of the 10 goals from the comprehensive plan are our work streams for corridors of opportunity. So you see here, safe, healthy, and active communities, housing access for all, diverse and resilient economy. These 6, I'm not going to read all of them, but these 6 make up how we implement and do projects. So when I spoke earlier of our implementation team is broken into work streams that match these. So for example, our diverse and resilient economic opportunity work stream has members of economic development. It has members of community engagement. It has, which sits within housing and neighborhood services. It has members of our digital divide team, all working together within that work stream to accomplish the broader city goal and to implement projects. So what you will not see here are the names of city departments. So we are moving away from this. CDOT is working on X. CATS is working on Y, economic development is working on Z, into a model that is a collaborative model where safe, healthy, and active communities is a mixture of people, again, from our diversity and inclusion team, from our CMPD team, from our community engagement team, from the county's public health team, from the county's parks and rec team, all working together to implement projects that get at that broader goal. So within corridors, there are dollars identified just for corridors of opportunity, but then there are leveraged investments, leveraged programs that we are implementing as part of a broader city. So if you've probably seen some of these titles and tags in other city programs. So let's just take one of those and talk a little bit about what that means. So Staying in Place is an initiative that sits in that housing access for all bucket. Staying in Place is focused on how we can provide tools and resources to our residents in neighborhoods so that they can do exactly what it says, stay in place. What are the missing gaps? What are the things we need to provide? Is that home repair? Is it tree care? Is it infrastructure investments, right? That's an assessment as part of Staying in Place. That program is funded through corridors of opportunity dollars, right? So although Staying in Place has its own kind of name and brand, the 3 pilot neighborhoods that staying in place is being implemented in are within corridors of opportunity geography. Hire Charlotte, same thing. That's an initiative of how we can provide the tools and resources for employers and people seeking jobs to be able to make those connections, and we can provide more opportunities. That's also being funded both through some corridors funding and some broader city funding, but we are piloting the Hire Charlotte programs within our corridors of opportunity geography. So it really gets to the heart of our goal within the Corridors of Opportunity program is how can we multiply our investment to create that lasting impact and that legacy and prosperity for our residents and business owners. So over the past year, our partnerships within corridors have also really taken off. These are just a few of the people who are actively investing in corridors of opportunity. We have, so on the city side, and I'll talk about it a little bit, we have between $65 and $75 million of investment coming from city dollars. We have also coming from partnership dollars, approximately 50 to 60 million, in addition to that growing. So we have people like the United Way. The United Way has aligned their United Neighborhoods program with Corridors of Opportunity. So they have 6 agencies that they are funding within Corridors of Opportunity so that they can provide resources to the social services side of our corridors. You have Wells Fargo, who is providing the funding for Beyond Open, $20 million for small business owners to be active and to provide the resources that they need in our corridors. They just announced their first round of grants. They had over 75% of the recipients were located in corridors. And I believe it was over 80% businesses of color, over 60% women-owned businesses. So again, we're really working with our partners to focus that investment so that we can do it all wrap around, right? It's leveraging everything together. We have LISC Knight Foundation, obviously dedicated and really funding heavily in the West Side. They're broadening that lens. Lowe's provides a lot of our home repair grant work. They've also been funding several of our public spaces. So partnerships continue to grow. We actually have a monthly meeting with many of these partners where we talk about what each of us are doing and how we can continue to work together. You'll see that name at the top. It's called the Neighborhood Investment Advisory Committee. I represent the city on that. We have Foundation for the Carolinas, United Way, LISC, Knight Foundation, Leading on Opportunity, all coming together. So we're talking about how are we multiplying our investment and how are we working together for that maximum impact. So you can see here, this is just, we've started to really align how our funding and buckets align to those themes. So where are we spending the dollars across the different themes, the different work streams. Interesting here is that something that makes Corridors of Opportunity very unique and really different from what we have done as a city before is that we not only have cross-collaborative teams working on a project, we have funding that aligns to that cross-collaboration. So we have for years and years been collaborative across city departments on projects. This is not the first time we have done that. What is different is that we have implementation dollars that are not, have not been allocated that can be spent on all of these different things. So for example, we have dollars that can go to public-private partnerships, right? Where we can work on, I don't know if anybody's been to Beatty's Ford lately, but there's a wonderful development where the Chase Bank is. We have Archive Charlotte, which is an awesome coffee shop. So that was a public-private partnership, right, with the city. So that was coming from our diverse and resilient economic opportunity bucket. You also have a transportation project there that is getting ready to go under construction. That funding came from our safe and equitable mobility bucket. Then you also have a placemaking project going on at the same intersection. That came from the retain culture and identity bucket. So there's the ability within corridors of opportunity to layer the funding. And then we're also funding the business district organization that represents that area that provides the human side and support for the businesses. So we're layering within corridors how we actually implement the dollars. And so it gives us that multiplier of impact. And this is the first time the city has really ventured into it from that place-based approach. So what have we accomplished over 2021 and 2022? You can just see some of the initiatives here, and some of the ones are the things that I was just talking about. Giving that business district support, the small business support, the facade matching grants, being able to really help people get their business launched. We have the Alternatives to Violence program that is currently in the Beatties Ford corridor. It's getting ready to expand into the West Boulevard corridor. We have a couple public spaces that have opened. So you have the Ritz at Washington Heights, which is open. We have some work underway currently in West Boulevard and an additional public space in Beatties Ford that's going in. We have several affordable housing projects. We have the Urban Arboretum Trail, which connects Beatties Ford toward Tryon, North Graham, that is in continual implementation. So pieces of it are under construction currently. You have Pole Vault, which is a partnership with Duke Energy. It provides the first public charging station in city right of way. It's also at the Ritz at Washington Heights. So just a couple samplings of the things that we're already doing. You will notice that most of these are focused in Beatties Ford and West Boulevard because those are the first corridors to go into implementation. What you will see in the following as we talk about looking forward is you're about to see that expand into additional corridors. So this is a different way to look at what's going on. All of these projects were active in 2022. Again, this list is continuing to get longer. All 9 city departments have been active in at least one or more of these projects. I'm just going to quickly go through, again, a sampling of what's going on in each corridor. In Beatties Ford, I mentioned we have several public-private partnerships, the partnerships at the corner of Beatties Ford and LaSalle. There's also some at the 5 Points intersection. We have the ATV pilot. We have the Historic West End Partners support, the placemaking things I mentioned before. Washington Heights is one of our pilot communities for staying in place. And then we have several intersection improvements and sidewalk gap projects. Just to note, infrastructure always takes longer to get in the ground than some of our partnerships and some of our programmatic pieces. So you'll notice that Beatties Ford, again, one of the first to go into implementation, but those infrastructure projects are just starting to really take shape and just starting to go under construction, even though they were announced a couple years ago. So West Boulevard, we're working with the neighborhood association to support them forming a merchants association. We're working with the West Side Land Trust on how they can continue to grow. We have historic wayfinding markers going in. They're in development right now. The city purchased a property through Corridors of Opportunity at the corner of West and Remount. It was slated to be a federal seizure, and we stepped in and said, we really want to be a part of what happens in this property. So right now we're in development of really helping to vision what is that going to become and how can we work with the community on that. We have been working with the YMCA. They are under construction with an atrium clinic. We're working with them on a partnership to get intersection improvements there, to figure out how to best utilize that community asset. And that includes several infrastructure improvements, again, with that intersection. Just a note here, we have a public meeting in West Boulevard to give community updates to the Neighborhood Coalition and to any member of the public next Tuesday on February 21st at the West Boulevard Library. Just wanted to make sure that I can make that plug. If anybody is near and dear to West Boulevard, you're more than welcome to join that. In Sugar Creek, we are working really to stabilize the intersection. So if you're familiar with Sugar Creek, we started public engagement at the intersection of Sugar Creek and I-85 in 2020, in spring of 2020. We then went straight into an expansion of the geography where we did a playbook from Derrida all the way to the Sugar Creek North Tryon intersection. That wrapped up last spring. And the main takeaway from that is that the entire Sugar Creek corridor, through extensive engagement, is focused on how we can improve the intersection of 85 and Sugar Creek. And until we really address that intersection, then it is hard to see change in the neighborhood and in the business community surrounding it. So we are very focused right now on completing a vision and feasibility on work at the intersection and how we can seed that change and what does that look like? Do we need to partner with new development? Do we need to work with our social services partners? We are hyper focused on that right now. We have a staying in place pilot also in Hidden Valley. We just launched, we actually had the first 3 businesses go online last week, a camera pilot, which is a public-private partnership with CMPD and business owners, where our Real Crime Center can have live feed into cameras on their property with their permission. And we are funding that so that if someone calls 911, the Real Crime Center can dial in immediately and see what's going on and be able to appropriately address that. We have established regular business owner meetings. They actually are full speed ahead on establishing a merchant organization. They have already voted on officers. It's really great to see. The city, we are paying for additional cleaning, mowing, really showing the community that we are here. We are not leaving. We will continue to invest in this area. We have an expanded facade grant program getting ready to go in place at Sugar Creek, where we are providing additional funding to business owners that want to improve their property. And then we also have Save Charlotte grantees there, which that targets a youth population, and that is providing after-school programming to youth to really keep people staying the course, provide them additional potential workforce development, see a different future, and provide that wraparound framework. So we have MECED and Rebuilding Together. There's some work also by DigiBridge happening, again, targeting the schools in the Sugar Creek geography. In Albemarle, we finished that corridor playbook in 2022 as well. We've released the roadmap, we've released the playbook. We are working on finding a willing property owner to be a part of a pilot program where we can preserve naturally occurring affordable housing without having to purchase the property. So we are actively out seeking partners for that, working very closely with our housing and neighborhood services team. We are doing some Hispanic small business ecosystem work. We're actually launching an entrepreneur training program where it will be in language. So it will be the first time the city has done Spanish language entrepreneurship training. That will start this spring. We're getting ready to launch a hub program, connecting small businesses to the resources they need, connecting job seekers to people hiring. We've been working with ULI, Urban Land Institute, on a cultural trail plan in the area. And we also just received federal matching funds to improve some of the sidewalk gaps and intersection improvements in Albemarle and Sugar Creek. Actually, we have a project in each. So very exciting, the things that are going on here. North Tryon, North Graham, over the fall, we did a playbook with them. I think it went really well. It was the first time we've done it in 6 to 9 months. It was a very rapid, intense process that was led by Will Linville on our urban design team. So we concluded engagement on December 13th, and that will come out second week of March is when the playbook will be released. We are focused on some specific sites in North Tryon, North Grand. We have Double Oaks, the Joint Communication Center. We're lucky to have some city-owned assets in the area that will probably be some of the first things to come off the ground. And I think we're looking forward to what are the pilot projects in North Tryon, North Graham, and I think we'll be there by the end of the spring. So I know people are waiting excitedly for what those are. Wilkinson Freedom, again, we're continuing coordination with our ETOD team, our Equitable Transitory Development team. They're looking to start work end of spring, early summer, and we'll be starting there as well. We had a cleanup this past Saturday. We have a partnership, Corridors of Opportunity, with Keep Charlotte Beautiful. So we had a cleanup this past Saturday in Wilkinson and Freedom to really kick off how we build trust with that community, how we get to know that community a little bit better. And so we look forward to continuing that conversation as we launch into the playbook over the spring, summer. That should wrap up before the end of the year. So we'll have a short list of projects and a roadmap for Wilkinson and Freedom. So I just can't reiterate enough this idea of scaling up. 2023 for us is a year of multiplier. It's a year of multiplying the work. So how do we go from having one successful Main Street organization with Historic Weston partners to how do we do that in all 6 corridors? So how do we build and what does that look like across the board? Because no corridor is exactly the same, right? So it's all about building trust. It's what tools do people need? It's what resources are important for them. And we're lucky that specifically with that top one, we have a partner in Truist. So Truist has funded, we got a grant last week that was announced that is a partnership on how we multiply that work in all 6 corridors. We will be multiplying our work with SafeBiz. A lot of people are highly interested in how can their corridor have that access to that program? How can they have the same service? How can they work with CMPD to strengthen their small businesses? And then we're also, last but not least, we're getting ready to release a RFP to really set up opportunity hubs in every corridor, which will be a physical presence on every corridor that will provide a front door for both our Hire Charlotte team and our small business resource team. So how can we support across every corridor, people who want to establish businesses, people who are looking for jobs, people who might need additional training. So that should be coming in the next probably 2 months. If I'm being conservative, it's like in development right now, but it's funded and it'll be moving forward rapidly. So again, we just look forward to continuing our implementation. It's been great starting to work on North Tryon, North Graham, and Wilkinson Freedom. Again, really great to get out in that corridor this past weekend. And we look forward to what those projects entail and how we can just keep continuing to build our partnerships. Obviously, we will continue collaborating across the city and how it links to other efforts going on. But yeah, I'll stop there. If people have questions, it's a lot of information. So I will tell you, you're probably like, that was a lot. But there's a lot of different routes it could take, and I'm happy to answer any of the questions that you may have. And I look forward to seeing you at some of our upcoming corridors, engagements, events. I believe our next cleanup is going to be in the Albemarle corridor, and we'll do it next quarter. So if anybody wants to come and lend a helping hand, it's a good way to give back.
This just warms my heart. Thank you so very much, Monica. While you guys are preparing your questions, please let me know if you have one. I'm glad that you mentioned the next cleanup, because one of my questions was the Keep Charlotte Beautiful partnership on those projects. I think the first one you named was along West Boulevard. Or
We did
Albemarle?
one in Sugar Creek
Sugar
in the
Creek.
fall, and then we just did one this past weekend in Freedom, Wilkinson. And then our next one will be in Albemarle. So we're kind of working our way. They have a quarterly cleanup, and it's been great to align our efforts. So we do it together.
Awesome. I was going to ask, will this continue and expand to other corridors? So thank you so much for that. I'll reserve my other questions for last. Does anybody have anything for Monica? I see Commissioner Walton and Wilden, starting with Walton, please.
Quick question. How long does this program last? And is there like phase 2 where you go to other corridors?
We have not broached the subject of phase 2 yet, but we have funding currently through, so the last round of capital funding, which is really for infrastructure projects, is scheduled to be in 2025. So it would be on the ballot. We just had one this past year in 2022, so it'd be on the ballot in 2024. Programmatic funding is continuing in multiple ways. So we're still working on that. And, obviously we're in the middle of a budget cycle right now. So that's kind of to be determined. We are leveraging our ARPA dollars. So from the federal government, the dollars we have from, the American Rescue Act. Basically, we have a bucket that is going into corridors, both on the economic development side and with housing that we're working on with that. So that's a long answer. We don't have a horizon on like, oh, we're sunsetting these corridors. Honestly, for systemic change in these 6 corridors, it's not a 2-year project. It's not a 3-year project. It is a very long horizon project. So we are right now very focused on how we get the work done, how we make an impact in a way that is authentic and representative of community needs, and has systemic implications, right? So we're very focused on framework, on longevity. So that is something that can not just be a flash in the pan, but something that has the structure that it needs to actually have that systemic change result, right? So, I can't even put a horizon year on what that timing looks like, because I think we could be here for a long time.
Commissioner Wilden and then Gaston.
Thank you for this presentation. Mine kind of plays off what you were just talking about. I'm a very firm believer in moving at the speed of trust, especially when working in communities. And so something that I'm curious about is how are y'all juggling the need for deliverables with some of these partnerships and the sunsetting of funding mechanisms through the federal government, what have you? So how is that juggle? And then what exactly, you brought up trust with communities a lot. So like, how do you know when you have the trust?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things at play. One is that we have to continue to build trust and deliver projects at the same time, because just going out and talking to people over and over again and not doing anything is in itself not helpful to build trust. So we are trying to establish that as a pattern, that like, we have heard you, we are not here to listen to you for 4 years. We are here to start doing. And I think that it is a continual question of, there are gatekeepers in specific communities. There are people we're not hearing from that we need to hear it from. So we are, Aisha Sabur, who is our community engagement manager, is out every day having one-on-one meetings, really taking the temperature of how we're doing. And I think we are just continually evaluating, where we have gaps. And then it is my promise to be as transparent as possible as to where we think we are in that process, so I don't know if you ever know 100% like, yes, we have everyone's trust in this, but we are trying to keep open ears, listen, make tweaks, modify as need to be, pivot if we need to, and be responsive.
Commissioner Gaston.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions for you. And so I've worked with this Corridors of Opportunity, currently working with them as a leader in the North Quarter on North Graham, North Tryon Street. So building trust is paramount. And we've held them to the fire, at least on my area we have. So don't worry about that. I don't know about the other areas, but I can tell you in our area we have. But I guess my question is, and there was an article that came out today in Axios, but one of the things, the 6 quarters are areas that have not been, have had major disinvestment for such a long period of time. And now there's this focus on these quarters. And we're making changes to the quarters and all those things are going. But how are you going to work to make sure that the changes that you're making to improve the communities are great, but it's also bringing in, I hate that word gentrification, but it's bringing in those changes, because gentrification can be good or bad, depending upon how you look at it, because it's bringing resources that haven't been there, but it's making it attractive to other people. So I guess when Commissioner Weldon asked about, you know, how long is this going to last? How do you determine when you're going to stop this process? Is it when, you know, it's changed over or it hasn't changed over? I think one of the things they were talking about in the article I read today, that some of the areas that had been historically Black were like 85% historically Black, and now they're like 20%. I think they were talking about Wesley Heights in that particular instance. So where is your stopping point, I
Right.
guess? Yeah.
And maybe you aren't asking this, but I'd also say one thing we are taking a deep dive at is, what does success look like and how are we tracking that? What are the things that show success? Because we don't want the unintended consequence, as you're saying, to be like, oh, look how successful we are. Homeownership rates are up. But that really just means that the neighborhood has like 100% changed. And then what is that wealth generation? Who is it benefiting, right? So I think we're in the middle of that right now as to what are the things we're measuring and what does that look like? So I don't have an answer for that piece of it. I will say that one of the unique things is that, so with CNIP, our Comprehensive Neighborhood Improvement Program, which is the program that pre-existed before corridors, it was all infrastructure, right? So it was 100% like, we're building a streetscape project, we're building Five Points Plaza, we're doing great projects, right? Really great projects that were community ranked and driven. There were no housing dollars associated with that program to come in on the backside and say, what is that going to do to the neighborhood and the community around it? And are we providing tools to backstop kind of what this investment might generate, right? What might create. So something a little bit different is that in corridors, we have that backstop. Is it enough? I mean, there are not enough housing dollars in the city of Charlotte, period, to be able to solve displacement and gentrification. But I will say that I'm excited to see what like our staying in place pilot communities, what are the results we have coming out of that? And, you know, as part of that, we're funding community health workers that are focused on the social determinant side of health, not just the like going to the doctor side of health, to really be like a community organizer and help us understand what's going on the ground. I'm hoping that we can learn from the staying in place pilot, from the people who are doing the work, like what are the resources we need and the tools we need to help us on the housing front and on the affordability front, so that we can like further target that, right? So right now we're talking about like, do we need to expand staying in place pilot? Do we need to add more neighborhoods to it? You know, but you have to understand like what the needs are. Is it home repair? Is it taxes? Like what are the things that people need to actually create that stability? The intention is not to have neighborhoods look 100% different tomorrow than they do today. That's why I want to be really clear that the goal of the program is creating opportunity, legacy, prosperity for people there now and for businesses there now. Just another note on that too. I think that's a really important cross section with the Hire Charlotte work and the workforce development work, because it's a two-sided equation. So like in the Albemarle corridor, for example, the majority of people, it's a very high percentage employed corridor, but it's a very high percentage of underemployed. So how do we provide resources to people too, that if housing affordability, if it's going to get more expensive to be in an apartment on Albemarle, how are we creating job paths for people to be able to go from $10 an hour to 20, 25, 30, you know, where they can absorb that cost and stay where they are. So we're trying to work on both sides of the equation, but it's a tall order. You know, I'm not going to say that it's easy, because it is not easy. It's very, and if someone else knew the solution, I think everyone would be doing it, right?
Thank you.
I'll have a question from Commissioner Winiker, and then I'll wrap up with some final questions.
Thank you. Very briefly, you mentioned some infrastructure projects, I assume, around transportation, street design, things like that. Where is that published, or where can we see what? I know they take a long time to come into fruition,
Yeah.
but at least what the plans are.
The list of projects or the specific designs?
Specific design.
We can, if you have a specific question on any of the designs, we can get it to you. The list of projects, I don't know if it's on our website, but I can double check, but I can email you also the list of projects. So we have 4 to 5 in West Boulevard, 4 to 5 in Beatty's. We just green lighted kind of larger projects in Albemarle and Sugar Creek. And we're actually pursuing a big federal grant for another project in Sugar Creek. So all of them are at different stages of design. So I can send you the list. And then if you have specific questions around the design or what they include, we'd be happy to share it.
Thank you.
And for the sake of time, I'll post this first question, not for a response, but just for follow-up, since you've kind of hit on it a little bit. From funding awards to on the ground, particularly as it applies to infrastructure. As we know, cost of materials is increasing. What you budgeted for 3 years ago is almost irrelevant in today's dollars. Can you speak to the adjustments that are being made to account for some of those funding gaps in the projects that are underway? Again, not for response right now, but just wanted to get that as part of the record. You mentioned that you needed a willing partner, a property owner, to pilot the NOAA without purchasing the property in the Albemarle corridor, I think you mentioned. What are some of the criteria? What are some of the general criteria, if you could hit on 3 or 4 bullet points?
I'm sure. We're looking for people who they can own a variety of number of units. It's not there is not a limit, a lower limit. I mean, obviously enough that we're getting an order of magnitude. So maybe no less than, say, 20 units, that they are obviously located in a corridor. And I'll just put a pin in this. Miles Vaughn with Housing and Neighborhood Services is actually running the kind of one-on-one meetings and working to find people. I think having, it can't be owned by a national or just an investment company. I think a good partner would be someone who has another reason to participate, whether that's they live here locally, they have an invested interest in the corridor. And our initial target was in Albemarle. I think we're willing to look at outside other corridors, basically outside of just the Albemarle corridor. So, they have a property that either needs some repairs on it, or they need, maybe there's another way to partnership with them, or it's a specific ask. So, do you need air conditioning units? Do you need, there's a whole bunch of different things, but we would be able to lock in a certain term of affordability, whether that's 10, 20 years in exchange for, filling that gap, whatever their gap may be, if that makes sense.
Thank you for that detail. ETOD, how is it structured and how does it do its work?
So the equitable transitory development planning work it's out right now. We'll be doing interviews and selecting a consultant in late March, early April. That is a part of a federal grant. That work and study is very highly focused on engagement and capacity building around what is transitory development, what that means for your community, your neighborhood, and then how does that influence the planning work that's going on with the long range team. So it is less on the side of land use planning and more on the side of capacity building and education, with some infrastructure work included in that. So what are the infrastructure projects we need to support transitory development? So one of a staff member in the Urban Design Center is leading up that project from planning. And I'm sure that if y'all are interested in hearing about it at a later date, we can come back and give a overview as to how that work's going, when it'll kick off. But it'll cover the whole Silver Line corridor. So
Thank you for sharing. And then finally, can you, speaking of sharing, share the activities and engagement for the Corridors of Opportunity team, a calendar or something?
sure, we can get you a
Candace,
short
so-
list. And I can also get and follow up. We have a newsletter too that goes out. So we can get you the Corridors newsletter too, which has kind of targeted stories, and it also has that engagement calendar in it. So if you guys would be interested, we could sign you up for the newsletter so you could stay in the loop on the things going on.
Thank you so much for brightening up this happy Monday. Monica Holmes, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, and you guys have a wonderful day. It's good to see you all.
Before I introduce our next, or we move to the next order of business, I just want to request a 10-minute additional allowance in case we might run over, since we started at 12:09 while we were trying to resolve some technical difficulties. So just wanted to request that cushion on everybody's, put it on everybody's radar, please. So I think we're all aware that our 2023 fiscal year work program includes some tasks that target our environment and sustainability goals. And there's some work there that is currently underway. And we have some committee members here that will provide an update. And in alignment with that, as we kind of work towards finalization of that work program item, I wanted to bring forth people who are in this space, who are experts, to kind of help us fill in any gaps or just identify what may be missing in our work, and just overall provide some advice for the work that we are doing in this space. As such, I invited our friends of the commission, Sustain Charlotte, to speak with us today. And we have from Sustain Charlotte, we have Meg Fensel, Eric Zaverl, and Hope Wright. And Eric and Meg are going to present to us. Candace, let me know when you're ready. Yeah. Again, just make sure that we are considering as much as we can in the work that we do, especially as it pertains to strengthening our environment sustainability adopted statement and some of the other environment sustainability work that's part of our work program. So please welcome Eric and Meg from Sustain Charlotte.
Thank you, Commissioner Samuel, and thank you all of you commissioners and staff for having us here today to talk about the importance of environmental decision-making in the work that you all do. We know it's difficult work, and we thank you every day for the work that you all are doing. We really care about our air quality, our contribution to climate change, water quality, and the tree canopy. And none of the decisions that are made about how we build our built environment happen in a vacuum. So all of those decisions really affect the quality of life for the people that live in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area. So if you're not familiar with Sustain Charlotte, we're a nonprofit organization, and we are all really focused on supporting sustainable transportation choices and sustainable land use. You may have seen these graphics before. They're from the Center for Applied GIS Science at UNC Charlotte. And in 1976, most of our region was forest and farmland, about 95%, and only about 3% of the land was developed. And the population at that time in the entire region was just over 1 million people, and we had a human footprint, which is average acres per person of 0.08. And just a few decades later, in 2006, it's a dramatically different picture. So 74% of forest and farmland, the amount of developed land increased by 8 times. And even though the population didn't quite double in that time period, the human footprint, which is really a measure of sprawl, increased by a factor of 5. So when we think about the consequences of sprawl, it doesn't just affect how people live, it also affects how they move between their homes and their work and daycare and the grocery store. So these are 2 images I'll show you from the Driving Down Emissions report by Transportation for America. And in the first case, obviously, they're very simplified, but when development is more clustered, not necessarily this high density, when it's more clustered, in general, it allows drivers to take fewer trips and shorter trips to meet all of their daily needs. But when development is more sprawling, it requires drivers to take more trips and longer trips. So this has a lot of impacts on our environment. And the city of Charlotte set a strategic energy action plan goal that we would become a low carbon city by 2050, which means we would reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to below 2 tons of CO2 equivalent per person annually. And we're currently, I believe, around 12. So in order to get there, we need to be designing buildings more efficiently. We need to be building communities holistically in a way that reduces our dependence on driving. Because you see that big gray piece of the pie over on the left, 36% of greenhouse gas emission contributions from Charlotte come from road transportation. And the city of Charlotte also passed their strategic mobility plan last year. Let me go back a slide. Whoops. The strategic, oh, we're fine. So we set a goal for 50%. There we go, thank you. Set a goal for 50% of trips in Charlotte to be taken by a means other than driving alone by 2040. We're currently at about 76% of commute trips taken by single occupancy vehicles in Charlotte. And the Charlotte DOT staff, when they presented this to council a few months ago, said that if we continue to grow at the rate that we're growing, and we just extrapolate our trends of how we're traveling around our community, we would need to double our road capacity. And that is not something that I think anybody wants to see happen. Not only are there equity implications, there would be a lot of environmental implications for our air quality, contribution to climate change, water quality, and tree canopy. So it's really important that when you're making these decisions as a body, that we take into account the environmental impacts of how we travel around. And now my colleague Eric Zaverl is going to talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan.
Hello, everyone. I know most of you, I know the staff, they have worked with them over many, many years on the comprehensive plan, the strategic mobility plan, and the UDO. And I would say that more than ever, the work of environment and sustainability in your committee with commission's work is needed more than ever. We never had this comprehensive look, this unified development ordinance that kind of ties in all of these components. So right there is the reason why that this needs to be happening now, to be able to fulfill the vision and the goals of the comprehensive plan. I would say you could argue that more than half of those 10 goals relate to the environment and sustainability. And if you take sustainability, which we do our work at Sustain Charlotte beyond what you traditionally think of solar panels or water, LED bulbs, we go to smart growth, and the way we live and move is more important for our future of sustainability. You could even argue, if you'd like, with the fiscal responsibility, that fiscal sustainability is needed for our future liability of what we put forth with our infrastructure. So that work is very important and is overlooked a lot with sustainability in general, because there's a certain pigeonhole that you kind of look at when environmental needs and sustainability, and we kind of try to educate the public. We work with the comprehensive plan and the UDO to kind of integrate smart growth and that planning ahead of time. So we could argue, and I don't want to spend too much time because I think you pretty much know all of these goals, but you can see that access to public spaces, parks, preserves, greenways is vitally important moving forward in this 10-minute neighborhood goal. That has to be taken into account in our planning moving forward. Safe and equitable mobility. Again, it's how we move our residents in the city and how we move forward We need to have clean air, and we need to have places that are still maintain our natural places, not just for the sake of air quality or water quality, but it's also mental health. We need to have this access on a daily basis to these vital, critical components for all of our mental and physical well-being. And then, of course, this ties into the health I mentioned already, but being active, our active transportation, walking and bicycling is critical for our mental and physical well-being moving forward. So that has to be integrated in everything that we do. And in order to do that, if you're out there walking or biking, you need the air quality to be healthier. Otherwise, you're just increasing exposure to chemicals and carbon emissions, and asthma cases continue to go up. So all of these things are connected, and all of these goals are connected. And, so much of it needs to be implemented responsibly and taken into account, which is difficult. Systematic approach to these goals and enacting them in, say, the UDO really takes a lot of concentration, a lot of mental space to be able to hold all these goals in your mind at the same time and check off the boxes to make sure that the development that's happening, the growth that's happening is accomplishing these goals. And it's not easy work for sure. And just to wrap that up, I think it's important moving forward that we look at how we grow, how we move is not just a nice thing to have in certain neighborhoods, but it's a requirement, not an amenity, but a requirement for every one of us to be able to have access and to experience this type of living, and not just for the few as well. So that's what we work every day to try to spread the word, to educate and convince folks that all of these things are connected and they do make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg and Eric. As you guys may have some questions for Eric and Meg, I just want to inform that Sustain Charlotte has very graciously agreed to be one of our partners as we move throughout the community, attacking or trying to accomplish work program item number 1, in that they've agreed to help us advertise our community meetings and such, and we may even co-host an event or 2. So I wanted to publicly thank you guys in advance for that willingness to share your space and audience. Questions for Meg and or Eric? Commissioner Lansdale?
Hi, guys. I know I'm going to put you guys on the spot here, but in your review of the UDO, do you see any conflicts in the design and definition of trails and active mobility facilities in the UDO and how they're defined and how they're used? I will lead out by saying that it shows a bit of concern in the UDO that we identify, they don't really identify a rail trail as we call ours, but they call it a transit trail. But in those definitions in the UDO, for me, it's offering up some concern that in that transit trail, there's also the opportunity for within the trail itself for advertising for businesses. Within the right of way of the trail itself, there's opportunity for businesses to have outdoor seating. There's opportunities for businesses to have planting strips and other pieces available. So when we call our trails an active transportation choice, do you see any conflicts within the UDO about those definitions and how they're defined within the UDO?
Well, I'll answer this one. I would say, it is difficult to be able to get all the definitions correct. It's a big document, but in the space, physical space that we have for infrastructure is as a premium, right? We know this. So the one thing I would say is it's difficult to balance the use and create great places, right? So the use of a trail to get where you need to go is also vitally important and is fairly new, especially in Charlotte when it comes to like greenways and stuff. They're thought of more recreational, right? But we need them to be more of a backbone for moving. However, you know, great urban places are interesting places. They have destinations. They have places that feel comfortable and where you want to be. So it is a balance between moving people, but also creating great places, right? So it's getting that proportion of that space correct. You don't want to limit those outdoor seating areas in creating that great space to be in, right? It's also for folks who are not, you know, if they're not living in a traditional home or have a yard, that open space, that public space is vitally important as well. So I know there's still more work to be done in refining and moving forward, I think in the UDO and some things like that, whether it's a definition or getting the right proportions to create these great places. I think that's what I would say to that particular piece. The addition of building a more robust network is also, I think, piece missing from that, where we need to invest more money in building complete networks of bike network, sidewalk network, and transit backbone, right? I think if you had this redundant system that that would maybe alleviate some of what, you know, your concerns are there as well.
Thank you. Any other questions for Meg and or Eric? And that people is one of the biggest reasons that I appreciate Eric being a part of the UDO Advisory Committee for as long as he was. So thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you, guys.
Our work program item number 4, Environment and Sustainability Subcommittee, comprised of Commissioners Blumenthal, Russell, and Rhodes. No, Wilden, thank you. And they will now have the floor to kind of go through the documents that I sent to you guys, I think on Tuesday or Wednesday of last week. Assuming everyone has had a chance to review those items and inspect, I'm going to turn the floor now to Will and Rebecca to kind of walk us through. Can we get that? Is there a way we can get that up on the screen? Which one do you want to start with first?
We can start with the statement, because I think that ties into what we're doing with checklist.
The the environment sustainability statement.
So I'll just go ahead. We should have just go ahead.
So sorry. You guys, these documents that we'll review here in just a second, to get your feedback before they come back to us for adoption. As you all know, I sent out a Google form to kind of solicit that feedback in advance so that we can better optimize our time for discussion here today, as this agenda was really packed and I did not receive responses from anyone. So there's nothing to share. Obviously, my feedback went directly to the subcommittee directly. And we've been in communications. Some things were addressed right away. Some things we'll continue to work through. So I appreciate you guys being willing and flexible to make those few tweaks. And now I believe Commissioner Wilden will go through this first document.
Yes, thank you. So our team has met, I believe, twice in person, and then we've been communicating quite regularly. So for the environmental statement, we took a look at it and we went pretty in depth at looking at it. It is fairly long. It's basically 2.5 pages when you look at it. But we thought that it encapsulated multiple different types of how folks might view the environment and sustainability as a whole, including smart growth, affordable housing, transportation, and community sustainability. And so we didn't want to change we didn't change anything in it because we thought that it really encapsulated everything that we think should kind of be a part of the other documents that we also created. And obviously we did a great job because none of y'all had comments on it. And so I'll pass it to Will for the checklist. And then we can go into the charge and responsibilities after that checklist.
All right. So for those of you who have been on the zoning side of the equation, you understand how in-depth and how detailed some of these rezoning petitions can be, but also overwhelming if honestly you don't have a point of view or if you're not familiar with some of the parts of development. So it can get overwhelming. It can get difficult at times to try to make that decision and do it 10, 15, 20 times a night without some solid background. So what we wanted to approach, where we wanted to approach this was just thinking about what are the criteria from an environmental standpoint that we should be looking at. And so here's just a quick list of bullet points that we thought about. You know, you're thinking about air, you're thinking about environmental health, you're thinking about noise. Like those are some of the things that are very common. If you think about city council rezoning meetings or just the zoning questions. But then you also have things that are not as top of mind. When you think about recreation or you think about cultural preservation, those things are also important because they also play into the development of the city. It plays into the environmental health of the city. And quite frankly, it plays directly into the 2040 plan and the UDO. So what it tried to do was create more of it started as a checklist, and I think I kind of went a little bit in the left field, but what I wanted to do, you can scroll down, please, is really think about it more in kind of a question format for each of the bullet points. So you can see, like for air, like what kind of emissions are resulting from this? And does that question prompt in the minds of the commissioners who are reading this as well as staff? Does that make them think to ask that question? Does that give you something to focus on as a member of the zoning commission and quite frankly for staff? And we think that's very helpful. And while this is a long list, you know, somebody like Commissioner Lansdale who focuses a lot on transportation, or somebody like myself who focuses a lot on small development, we can take chunks of this checklist and reinforce some of the things that we're looking for, and then spread those concerns and spread those thoughts about how we should be looking at rezoning out to the broader group. So you can see we've got about 4 pages here of just kind of really high level questions or thoughts that you should have as you review your rezoning petition. And what the thought is that we would partner with staff, because some of these questions are already a part of the analysis, but then there's some things that are not, and pull that together with staff. So not that we're making additional work for them, but we're making this more seamless. We're putting this in at the front end of our zoning packet. And then we're using that as a baseline to kind of ask those additional questions and get additional information that we're looking for. So it gives staff heads up on what we need. It gives us a prompt on what to ask. And I think it will make us more efficient as not only a subcommittee, but as a zoning commission and planning commission. And I'll take any questions.
So I see a few hands raised, and I think that before we take questions, Commissioner Russell, can you speak to the discussion the subcommittee had about the intended use of this document, who the audience is, and the way it should be used?
Yes. So to answer your questions, the intended audience is mainly for staff and for the zoning committee. So we are identifying these as things that we would want to see from an environmental standpoint as we review rezoning petitions. And some of these questions, like I said, are a part of the current packet for each rezoning petition, but then there can be follow-up based on some additional questions. The purpose of this is to include it in the packet, just like when, if you've been on zoning, you know, we get the sheet that comes up front that says, hey, if you approve it, this is how you ask for it. If you deny it, this is how you ask for it. This will simply be that second sheet that's in the front. So it'll just be a 1-pager, or in this case, 4-pager that comes at the front of the packet. And that it will just be printed out that one time for the packet, and that will be it. But I think that it helps staff kind of identify and drill down on some of the things that we're really looking for environmentally.
Okay, so again, before I take questions, I think that, and I think the email that I sent with my comments on this particular piece is that I think the vein in which it was created was outside of the environment and sustainability. It was outside of items in the work program number 4. And so I suggested to the subcommittee members to think about potentially making this checklist its own work program item, since it does cover so much. I can tell you that I didn't anticipate like a list. I was thinking that, I think I shared that with you guys, thinking that this would actually be a checklist. I do have a concern in that we may be asking staff to do something that's different in their normal process. And I didn't have that ahead of time conversation with Allison to that regard. So I think my perception of what this document was to be is different than what is presented. And with that, I think I saw Commissioner Gaston and Winokur, Lansdale and Gusman, and we'll go in that order, please.
Thank you very much. I just had one question, and I guess it was a comment. And I thought I filled out that Google form, so I'm upset because I made sure I filled it out. So I don't know what happened. Maybe I didn't submit, but it's okay. My only question I had, really, or statement correction addition, was the infrastructure and utilities. When they listed out the infrastructure and utilities, I didn't see anything about internet, and internet inclusion is my thing versus telephone, because nobody uses a landline anymore. So I just thought that because people use the internet now and it's like a utility, that should be something specifically listed in there. That was my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gaston. I think Winokur, Lansdale and Gusman.
I need to avoid any auctions because I hope I don't want to mistakenly buy a Picasso. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Winokur. Lansdale, please.
Yeah, my apologies for getting in the comments late, but I did have some issues on this one. You know, I appreciated this document, appreciated the work that went into the document was very good. I think it came from a perspective prior to my arrival on this committee, this commission. You know, I asked specifically if you want to slide down, if you can, someone can scroll down to where it says transportation section that has the breakout. Thanks, Candace. Appreciate that. And there we go. That should be good enough right there. So, you know, my questions always come from access to and egress from the site. Those are always my questions, and how they impede active mobility users. Those are my comments that are on the Google form. You know, and I have a hard time when I look at those being prepared for my zoning reviews. We have to go to several different places for information. I'd really like to see some more consolidation. Getting into that kind of, first off, we have to do the lift of the site evaluation. Then we have to do the lift of kind of reading that that document that we get, then we have to go to another Excel thing that we have to get information from, even though it says on the form that there were no comments, there may be comments in another piece. And I just really don't know how to get my head around that piece. And as far as for transportation, again, I want to see more about the issues that need to be resolved rather than staff recommends approval based upon the resolution of outstanding transportation issues. Got to get more on what those are for me to be comfortable with this document moving forward. So the example I used, and I'll just want to take a quick little poll for me, is it, has anybody on this dais seen a traffic impact study?
Yes.
Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, have you seen it associated with the zoning that has come in?
Yes.
That's how I've seen it.
Well, you mean company or seeing it just as part of the work?
As part of the work, as a representation on the zoning that we're to evaluate?
Provided by petitioner.
Provided by the petitioner. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for playing along. I appreciate that. Sorry to have to ask those secondary questions, but so I'm looking for staff to kind of help with that piece for me. And I know it's hard. I think the information's out there. It's just trying to help us get to the point of this checklist to help us, not only has it check a box, but give us the link and information for review would be helpful for me on the transportation side.
Terry, and I would like to add that Commissioner Blumenthal and I met with Dave Patton. And that was one of the things that we talked about. I specifically brought up like the heat map, that the high injury network that you talked about, and how can we get more robust information as a part of a petition. And so that is actually one of the things that he is thinking about as well, and staff is thinking about, not to speak out of turn, but there is the process of maybe trying to reimagine what that information is and how it comes to us. Maybe it is a link form as opposed to printing out the document. And I think there's also some considerations with how city council views rezonings that have kind of had to be considered as well, how that's presented. So yes, there is a recognition that we do need to have a little bit more robust information for the rezoning so that we can delve into it as a petition. You can get everything you need and then balance that with how that information is presented.
I will mention that the reason why I asked for the copy. I'm sorry, thank you for that additional context, Commissioner Russell. But I will remind that the reason why I asked for these comments in advance is because I knew this agenda was very, very tight. So I see more hands as we continue to discuss. I'm seeing more hands go up, and for the sake of time and to respect the UDO teams and the CAP team's time, I want to make sure that we're not shortening their presentation. So if you want to play along, if we want to continue this discussion, I will need agreement from all that we are agreeing to stay longer than our normal 12 to 2, but again, in consideration for staff and their commitments beyond that time frame. So just everybody be very considerate of the time here. I will say that at this juncture, it sounds like that there's more concerns or questions around this particular document. One of the things that I thought about was, as we're continuing dialogue, do we, because I'm also considering the bandwidth of the subcommittee members, right? And their deliverables, and changing those deliverable dates, they have consequences for our other work program items. So again, just being considerate of all of the above as we continue questioning, if we can please make them as short as possible. And if it's more feasible to address this as a follow-up, then please let's take that opportunity as well. Commissioner Gusman, and then we'll finish with Winokur.
I'll try and be quick. I also kind of, when I first saw this, presumed it was more of a checklist for us to work through. I wasn't anticipating it as much being I see the value and I see why you guys would go that direction. And it's not a bad direction, but yeah, when I first reviewed it, I was viewing it as more our checklist. So I had minimal comments because I do feel it's a good way to help focus in while you're serving on zoning committee. to the other point, he's just left the room, but Terry and I are working on setting up some additional time to meet with Dave and honestly, Transport CDOT to address some of those specific issues that we've mentioned before. So I feel there are efforts that we're pursuing to improve on that category, but I'll finish my comments. Thanks.
And Commissioner Winokur, this is my other follow-up. We had during a planning committee meeting, a conversation with I think it was facilities management on the county side to figure out, okay, what are the specifics in the plans of the MEC playbook? Like where will parks come in and things like that? I saw that greenways were mentioned on there. That's very important, but also other parks amenities, like Eric was saying, it's an important part of our infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you both for making those comments quick hits. And then I just remembered that Commissioner Wilden has another document yet to review. Commissioner Russell and Wilden, do you need any additional context based on the feedback that you've received from the checklist? Before we move to the next document, I think that maybe we can talk offline about the intended purpose of the document, just so that we don't take Allison staff by surprise on any undue or any unexpected asks. And I just need better context from that point of view, if you guys don't mind. And with that, I'll take it to Commissioner Wilden.
So the last document, we wanted to put together a draft charge and just the roles and responsibilities of what this subcommittee would look like. And so it's fairly straightforward. The charges, I think we kind of know that we're trying to save the world. And then so with this subcommittee, we did say meet 6 times a year. That can be coffee, that can be whatever you want it to be. But we do think that it needs to be comprised of 3 members. So both from zoning, at least one person from zoning, at least one person from planning committee. There was a conversation of maybe it should also include someone from the executive committee, but I did not include that in this, but I am open to that suggestion if others like that as well. The subcommittee, we did want to make sure that that this subcommittee isn't just like a subcommittee and that you never hear from us. We want to make sure that the planning commission is like fully aware of what the statement is, and then how we can implement this kind of moving forward through zonings and the other work that we do. And so that is kind of a big piece of it. And as well as doing annual review of the environmental statement and working with planning staff to ensure that orientation packets include all the updated versions of the environmental statement. And also that the subcommittee would then serve as kind of a reference for any questions concerning sustainability issues.
Seeing no hands raised after Commissioner Wilden finished, I will just add to this one that some very quick, and thank you so much, Commissioner Wilden, for making those quick hit edits based on the email that I sent last week. But I think we still need to continue to work through some of the smaller details, like how are the committee members appointed? You know, at what points in the fiscal year do they meet? How are changes to the subcommittee made? Are they elected? What method are we attending city council or board or any other boards or advisory bodies that may be pertinent to this work? How are we connecting with those other bodies? And should we have considerations for elements of sustainable development, since development is in our wheelhouse? Those are things that I may bring to XCOM to kind of expedite some of that resolution. So thank you so much for addressing some of those immediate quick hit edits to this document. Any questions for Commissioner Weldon? Any other comments? Thank all three of you for the work. And so ideally, what we'll have over the next, I guess, 20 some odd days, since we're in a short month, is that these documents come back to us for us to adopt in our March work session. Did I say that right? I think I did. And so any additional comments, if you have anything that we couldn't fit in today, please feel free to email Commissioners Wilden, Russell, and Blumenthal together, so that as they continue to work, they don't miss any of your feedback as they continue to flesh this out. So thank you all again. Thank you so much. And now I think in the agenda for new business, we are at work program committee reporting. Since we've already heard from Environment Sustainability Subcommittee, there's only one left. And of that subcommittee, we have Commissioners Weldon, Winokur, and Neely. And which of you will be reporting on your progress today?
I will.
Thank you.
Hopefully an expedited report. The committee, we've gotten together a couple of times and taken a look at the documents, the rules of procedure, and the interlocal agreement. There's floating amongst the three of us this list of places that we'd like to see changes made. The ones for the rules of procedure, those changes can be made by this group and everybody in this room. And so those are the easy ones. The interlocal agreement changes need to go through a process of being approved by the governing bodies that have signed the agreement, basically City Council and County Commission. So any changes we'd like to do there, we need to, first of all, run those through the city attorney. Ms. Hagler-Gray has been working with us to review what changes we make. We have a list of changes that I am going to send off to her. I'm waiting for a little bit of feedback from Dave about zoning process, but I'll note the changes fall basically into these three categories. The Planning and Zoning Committee have specific duties detailed in the interlocal agreement. And what we would like to see is that details authority, not necessarily tasks. What happens is there's a task that is delineated in there now that says we approve plats. Well, we don't approve plats. And there are things that we may do as a zoning committee that will change over time. And we'd like to just have the authority to do those things, but not have it specify the specific tasks that we do. Also, we'd like to get some updates in, hopefully, in terms of timeliness. We are supposed to get new commissioners at the end of June, and we'd like to put in that date. That's when we get our new commissioners, and to get replacement commissioners in a reasonable time as well. Also, the Section 4 has many names of many committees that exist or may have existed when the document was created that no longer exist. I don't know what the Mecklenburg Union Planning Committee is, or commission. Okay. And so those are things that may just need to be adjusted. So again, I'll get that document off to Ms. Hagler-Gray probably today or tomorrow. Hopefully we'll get some feedback from her. And then next month we'll bring to the party all the changes for the rules of procedure that you guys need to take a look at. And also Ms. Hagler-Gray's feedback as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson, and the other committee members. Excuse me, I will remind that the subcommittee's charge is to present to commission the recommended changes, and then we all agree or not agree to move forward to explore how to make those changes, particularly to the ILA rules of procedure. Obviously, as Commissioner Wilson said, can be handled amongst this body, but we need to make there will be a vote and agreement on what we press forward to City Council and Board of County Commission. I just wanted to add that just additional bit of clarity. Again, thank you, Commissioner Walton and committee members Neely and Winokur. With that, we have Catherine with us, who is going to come up and share with us the latest and greatest with CAP. And Allison, if you have any additional pre-context.
Sure, I'll mention a couple things real quick in advance of both of the presentations. First, we are on City Council agenda this evening to talk about both projects serving as an official kickoff for us in a way, in a public way. It's really, I think, the first time we've been before full council talking about both projects in a little while. We've been in committee. I think this will be a brief update from Catherine and probably a little bit more robust from Laura. I think we've been before you all talking about community area planning. I think we're all really excited to get it started. And we've got UDO effective date and changes approaching us very quickly. And Laura will talk about what we're doing to prepare for that. Thanks.
Thanks, Allison. Good morning, everyone. Afternoon. Catherine Mahoney with the Long Range Division, co-leading the community planning effort with Kathy Cornett, sorry. That's the first time I've ever done that to us. We spend enough time together. Sorry. Last month, I presented to you all an overview of the community area planning effort and what our kickoff action plan was. And since then, we've been putting that plan into play. So our website is live and we have a lot of good content up and available. We have a video, some FAQs, our dynamic map. And then we've been attending meetings like town hall meetings and a few community meetings to share information about our effort. And then, as Allison mentioned, after tonight's audience with council, we will activate the ambassador toolkit and the community reports that we shared with you all in January. And we'll also publish the notifications that we had listed out, our email blast, which will go to about 26,000 subscribers. Our social media campaign will be kicked off. Our press release will be distributed. And then our notification to you and elected officials will be shared. Within those notifications, we will be publishing our workshop dates, which are scheduled to begin on March 28th. And then next month, when we're before you all, we'll share a preview of what the workshops are designed to look like for the March, for the spring workshops. So that's all I had to share today. Are there any questions?
Thank you so very much. Do we have any for Catherine? Thank you. See you soon. And now we'll have Laura with our what's new with UDO. It should go away.
Thank you, Candace. Good afternoon. Going to give you a quick update on the UDO and where we are in this process. So we'll just start with some of what we've been doing to get prepared for the effective date that, as Allison mentioned, is June 1st of this year. Boy, I feel like I'm so short back here. One thing that the Long Range Division of our department has been doing, I'm not the Long Range, I'm sorry. Catherine, you're welcome. The Land Development Division, yeah, we can't get our words straight to save our lives today. The Land Development Division, and they will be the folks that will be administering the UDO. They've been holding UDO University, and you can see that we are halfway through that. These are a series of informational sessions and also allowing people to ask questions and get answers during the sessions. And they're every Friday from 1 to 2:30. And has anyone sat in on any of these? Okay, yes, and thank you. They are all recorded and available after the live sessions. And you can see that we have completed 1 through 5. So we are halfway through and there are 5 more sessions. So encourage you guys as you will be using the UDO, particularly when you're on zoning committee, to go back and watch these sessions if if you so please, I think they could be really valuable. Trying to go to the next slide. Let me see if that doesn't. That's because I'm on the wrong part of this. Other things for those of you guys, particularly on zoning, to be aware of. As of February 1st, we started accepting conditional rezoning petitions to UDO districts, and we quit accepting conditional rezoning petitions to our current, which will soon be our legacy ordinance. So these are the first development submittals that will be required to use the UDO regulations. They will include, in many cases, if they meet the threshold, the comprehensive transportation review requirements. And again, we are no longer accepting petitions under the current soon-to-be legacy ordinance, though you will be seeing those coming forward for still a long time, because it takes a while for folks to get through the process, and we do have a backlog in rezoning cases. So it could be easily a year or so before we see the end of things coming in with conditional rezoning under our current ordinance. In addition, on March 1st, we will be accepting conventional rezoning petitions to the UDO districts. Anything that is conventional that comes forward after the effective date of June 1st, we will change the zoning. We will translate it to one of the UDO districts. So for conventional rezonings, any cases after June 1st, you will no longer be seeing our current zoning districts. We are also, as we said we would be doing before the UDO was even adopted, we are continuing to look at the ordinance, making adjustments. And so we're starting with some text amendments even before the ordinance goes into effect. Again, we always have intended and for this to be a living document, and it will be throughout the years, will be amended regularly as conditions change, as we find things in the ordinance that maybe aren't working very well, as policy changes and so forth. So we have two types of amendments. One is cleanup, where it really is, you know, something wasn't worded very well there. Sorry, go to that on the next page. I won't get into that now. And then there's also some larger amendments, broader amendments that we're, for lack of a better term, now calling other. And for our initial text amendments, we plan on presenting those to council prior, and for zoning committee, this going through the process prior to the effective date of the UDO. And what that means is we will be filing at the end of this month and are busily working on those now. So again, cleanup text amendment. We anticipated this even before the UDO was adopted. We're doing things to add clarity, make minor adjustments, make corrections. Could be something as benign as, oh, we have the wrong reference. We reference, you know, a certain section and the number is wrong. So fairly straightforward. And then other text amendments too, in particular that we're working on right now, is a text amendment related to land clearing and inert debris, LCID landfills. That has been a popular topic in light of a particular proposal out there right now. And also adjusting some uses permitted in the CG and CR, the commercial zoning districts, as related to activity centers. We also have a new advisory committee, or will have soon, that will provide feedback on these other text amendments. And then zoning map changes, just to explain how we go from our current zoning map to where we will end up in the longer term. So on June 1st, any pre-UDO conventional zoning district, so if you have a B1 district without a CD, for example, that will translate to the new CG district. So we will translate all of our conventional zoning on June 1st, you will hopefully get on our website and you will not see any conventional zoning on our map under our old zoning districts. And this is set up in the UDO, so it's a very straightforward. If you're this today, you become this tomorrow. If you're this today, you become this tomorrow. District by district, we clarified what the translation would be. But in addition to that, we know that just because we translate doesn't mean that's always going to end up being the district that we want in the long term to implement the comprehensive plan and the policy map. So we have begun and we'll be continuing this year, next year, and even into 2025, what we're calling alignment rezoning process, where we are evaluating in the first few years conventional zoning districts in conjunction with the policy map. Will the conventional district on a property end up giving us the future called for on the policy map or not? We will be recommending some changes. How far we go with those changes, what kind of changes we're still working on. We'll be having conversations with you all. Throughout this year, we'll be out in the community talking about particularly educating folks about the new districts. And we will be recommending rezonings. Well, have the map at the end of next year and bringing that forward in early 2025 through zoning committee and to council for recommending changes to conventional zoning to bring it in alignment in many cases with the policy map, so that we don't end up with by right development under regulations that don't give us the type of future that we've talked about through the comprehensive plan. We will be then going in the latter part of 2025 and into 2026 and evaluating conditional rezonings to see which of those should be changed so that we are aligning zoning with the comprehensive plan and the policy map. So the ultimate goal, and we'll kind of see how far we get and exactly what the alignment criteria are, we'll have that better defined at the end of this year, but we will be applying the UDO districts to the extent that the criteria determines to get us, again, a new official zoning map that will implement the place type map and, more importantly, the comprehensive plan. I probably just said a lot of this, so I know we're kind of short on time, but thank you also, Chair Samuel, for extending our time a little bit. But again, getting the standards, development standards in place to achieve the vision and updating our official zoning map. We think what this will do in the long term is, with an updated zoning map, will remove the outdated regulations that we have now as far as zoning, provide better guidance towards development that will implement the comprehensive plan. And we think that we will not be in the same place where we are now, where we have mismatched zoning and future desires for the community. And I think I went through this already, so I won't belabor that, but I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Laura. Do we have any hands raised? Commissioner Russell, please.
Hi, Laura, Commissioner Russell. Just a quick question. I saw earlier your slide about text amendments that you clean up some minor changes. What is your definition of minor when it comes to text amendments?
For the cleanup, we may have an adjustment to a standard that's a few feet. If it is a new approach or a bigger change, then we would pull that out independently from the text amendments. But it's primarily what we have so far, and we're still in the midst of pulling the rest of this together, is really, this doesn't quite work right. the terminology is confusing, the references are wrong, things like that. We're not really looking at changing approach through the cleanup. We would pull something out that is really a change approach, a different standard of any significance out of the cleanup text amendment.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gusman.
Just real quick, I want to highlight, thank you, Laura, good stuff. Want to highlight to everybody that this transition will still be going on as we roll to the next year, where we will see new commissioners serving on zoning committee. So you might be thinking, oh, I don't understand, or I don't necessarily applying. Please spend a little bit of time trying to figure out how it might adapt and how you might utilize this information. Just because going forward, this will be a huge hill to climb up in as short as 4 months if one of you transitions and isn't coming up to speed as we go through this process. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder, Mr. Vice Chair. I think that's all the questions that we have, Laura. Thank you so very much. And thank you, everybody, for being very conscious of your time. And while I have, going to take a few minutes to go through some quick hits, UDO University, just like Laura mentioned, they're up to session 5, you said, Laura? 5 more. Which went through the districts. I think neighborhood 1 and 2 was this past Friday. And so there's how many more? 5 completed, 5 more. 5 more to go. They're every Friday at 1 o'clock and I'm sorry, from 11 to 1. And they are recorded. So if you don't get to catch it live, please go back and rewatch. They are very good refreshers and points of reference. I would be remiss if I did not mention that the last 2 days of January were very traumatic. That's my word, not theirs, for our rezoning team and planning department in general, as petitioners and developers tried to beat the clock on submitting petitions under the old policy. Please be very mindful that as they move through that mountain of a load, that dump of rezoning petitions, what we are asking of them, I can imagine that they're probably might be close to the end of their rope with being asked to do something additional. So as we are working through our work program items, please, 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 very, very kindly keep that in consideration. Also, going back to the presentation that Commissioners Russell and Wilden did today. And actually, let me back up a little bit more, because work program item number 1, you guys know that we are very diligently trying to get that off the ground, more so behind the scene now. But as more conversations are had about how to best accomplish it, more people keep getting interested. That's an excellent thing. That's a good thing. However, it's also is delivering some information that or some requests that I didn't anticipate, that have had to go to staff, that have equated to, well, maybe we need to take a look at this from a different perspective. So some things that, as Allison and I are in a couple of meetings together, there's and as these concerns kind of arise about rezoning process in general, there are some things that Allison has been very willing to take a look at. And I think as those issues kind of mount up, there's a rezoning tune-up kind of that's being considered for the planning staff, the rezoning team. And so some of the asks that we're making through work program item number 4, that checklist particularly, can be addressed in there. But again, conversations around that process is ongoing. So again, just be very mindful and considerate of the asks and the time that we are requesting of staff, as this is a frontier they've never been, they've never approached before. These are uncharted territories. And so as they begin this process or in the middle of this transition period, just keep in mind that I think that who mentioned the mountain of information that you're having to look through a rezoning. So just think of all the balls that they have to keep in the air right now between the old amendment and, I'm sorry, the old policy and the new policy. So again, just wanted to put that reminder out there. And then finally, I'll take a point of privilege. In many of you, if not all, are aware that, was it in January? Last month, I sent, I think it was January 4th, decision was made on a particular rezoning case. I happened to be in the room with zoning committee members to hear the decision, spoke to 3 members of the zoning committee on January 9th about my intent to send a letter potentially directly to council regarding some concerns that I had. Did that in advance because I didn't want it to take anybody by surprise. And as I continued to contemplate what that email would be, or if even I should send it, I kind of laid it aside. Maybe I should just leave it alone. Like, the decision is going to be made. The decision is going to be what it is. But then the more and more I thought about it, the day of the decision for council came, and I decided to send it. I know there are at least 2 commissioners among this dais right now that were caught by a surprise on the send. And I won't speak for those commissioners, but I will speak for myself in that I think some of the comments that I've heard about the email that I sent to council, which, by the way, I've done quite a number of times, never, ever have they paid attention to any of my individual emails, ever. City council, board of county commissioners, that's different. They always pay attention. City council never pay attention to anything that I send. And I didn't think this was going to be any different. It turned out to be completely different. There was not a way for me to anticipate that. I was in the planning committee meeting at the time that I got the note that the email would be read into the public record. And I remember whispering to Commissioner Blumenthal, like, and I think I might have even, to explain the brevity of last month's meeting, by the way, everybody raced downstairs to see. What I want to say to zoning committee members, that email that I sent was not meant to offend any of you. If you know of my service on the planning commission, specifically on the zoning committee, I have always advocated, don't steamroll zoning committee's opinion. Pay attention to the notes. Don't just say yes for the sake of saying yes. Pay attention to our meetings. Don't steamroll. These are texts, these are emails that I normally send to council. The voice of the zoning committee is of high importance for me personally and for this body and for the work that we do. And I don't want that to be misconstrued or misunderstood based on the email that I sent. The reason I sent the email, to bottom line it, is our charge, our purview, what we do is in the focus of planning. And I'll go on record, I've said it to Commissioner Gusman, who chairs the zoning committee, that there are concerns that the zoning committee over the past 6 years have been advocating and expressed concerns over. And I think that if you don't mind, I'm going to share some of our personal information. And I actually told Commissioners Russell and Lansdale this the day that I contemplated sending the email, is that we had an opportunity to voice a concern, yet still vote the way that we vote. I didn't have a problem with the vote, and I'll say that publicly. I don't have a problem with the vote. If I was a part of the zoning committee, my email would have just been part of the dissenting vote, of the dissenting note, right? But because I'm not on the zoning committee, and because I'm very passionate about what I do and how I serve my community, I decided to send that email to council. And it was not to minimize, diminish, or do anything other than express a different opinion than the zoning committee. And to those committee members who got a different impression, my apologies. I did not have a chance to speak with Gaston, Rhodes, Walton, Harvey. So if that email caught any of you by surprise, or if you took it any differently than what my intent was, my apologies. I do not think that the opportunity to speak on a particular topic is exclusive. Again, the charge of this commission is to plan. And speaking about that particular petition and listening to staff rationale about why it was palatable, I took a different position and I decided to send that communication to council. I won't hold anybody's time further than this. It is 2:09. We have now officially been in session for 2 hours, but I am open to anyone who wants to have discourse or discussion or comment further. Not together, because that might be considered a public meeting, but I am open to anyone, anytime, any place. If there are any other comments or clarity that I need to provide on that. Yes, Commissioner Gusman.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Samuel. I appreciate the broad extent of your comments, definitely. And I think that what all of us could kind of take from this is, as we represent ourselves, whether it's to the media or to the elected officials, that we recall that if we are expressing an individual opinion, we need to be clear that we are expressing an individual opinion. I don't think anyone on the committee had a problem with Chairwoman Samuel's comments. Only that ended up becoming what it became. Thank you.
Rhodes.
So thank you for providing the background feedback. I was one of the ones that was caught off guard. I got it at 2:35 p.m. on that Monday. And I was like, I didn't have a problem with you disagreeing with us. I just would have rather had a heads up to know what was going on. Furthermore, we sit with council in the back because we have dinner. And it was pretty degrading for us as zoning committee members. There were comments that were made that I just think they completely got it wrong. Like, if she is the chair and she disagrees with them, what type of zoning committee have we put together? And I am very concerned about what we have. It really kind of diminished one petition in particular, that particular petition. There was a lot of work that went into that one. And so we were all, I guess I'll speak for myself. I was blindsided and a bit disappointed because we put in a lot of work into that particular one. So it didn't go unnoticed. It wasn't a one that was just a check off the box. It wasn't unseen. It was a lot of heightened work. Petitioner spoke with us. So it was, I don't know, it was disturbing. It was disturbing to hear the comments that were made behind closed doors. And because of the position that you have here, it appeared that there was a sense of distrust of the decision that we made. So I agree with what Chair Gusman said, that we do have to be very, very mindful of how we send things and write things based on the positions that we have here, because it was taken as if you took a separate approach and you had a problem with how we voted. And it went, and I guess from that raised a lot of questions. I know that you saw one thing on the front side of, well, we should reprimand her for her position or what have you, but which I think everybody was like, that was a bit overzealous. But in the background, the comments that were made about us were very disturbing.
Thank you for adding that context. Excuse me. Thank you. And I don't want to have this as a point of discussion, but again, or rob anyone from providing additional feedback, but I do want to remain conscious of staff's time. And here I get to the end and out of gas. Thank you, Commissioner Rhodes. And if you don't mind, I'd like to talk with you further offline if you have space today. And if, I believe that's it for my additional 2 cents. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Wilden.
Seconded by Gusman.
Motion by Bolden, seconded by Gusman and Gaston. I'll consider purses on the table as unanimous consent.